Hi, I'm Liz with the Missouri Star Quilt Company, and I'm excited today to show you how to customize your own pillows. I'll show you how to make your own piping and attach it, how to create an envelope back or a zipper closure for your pillows, and how to work with some super fun shiny linen. Let's get started. So supplies to make your pillow will be determined by whether you want to do piping and whether you want to do an envelope back or a zipper closure. If you're doing a zipper closure, you will need a zipper. If not, you'll just need extra of your fabric so that you can overlap in the back to make the envelope closure. I'm going to use this sparkly linen blend. I'm also going to make my own piping, so I need yay rope and some fabric to make my piping, and I will need the bias ruler from TQM Products or to cut on the bias. So I'll show you how to do that with a regular ruler, but this ruler makes it super fast and easy. You also want a nice sharp pair of shears. So the first step to adding piping to your pillow is to make bias binding. So what we're going to do is first square up about a half of a yard of our selected material. So I'm going to straighten up this edge. And then I'm going to straighten up this edge. And it's not incredibly important, but right now I'm going from 3 to 21, so that's 18 inches, so that's a good exact half yard. And then what I'm going to do is open this up and use my ruler to cut bias. So what we have is, with the fabric is selvage to selvage, and it has a little bit of stretch to it. So you can kind of see the fibers have a little bit of stretch to them. Then there's lengthwise fabric that runs along the selvage, and there is no stretch there. But we want bias because when you hit the 45 in that angle, you get lots of stretch. And what that lots of stretch does for you is go around corners and handle going around curves really well. So the easiest way that we have found is to have an extra tool. And this makes it super, super easy. But I'm going to show you how to do this if you don't have that tool too. So just hang in. But what I'm going to do is line up my fabric on my mat and open my bias ruler. It unfolds, and you can just lay the top of it and the bottom of it on your half yard. It fits perfectly, and then you can cut along that ruler edge and you will get a perfect 45. So I'm going to do that right now. And this is awesome for making bias binding. And this ruler being 2.5 inches, close my rotary cutter, means that I can just move it over. And if I were making regular bias binding, I would just make it over, make my next cut, and I can cut everything just right. However, for this piping, we just need to wrap it around our yay rope. So I actually need it to be 1.5 inches, not 2.5 inches. So what I'm going to do is slide this over a little bit. And you can see on my ruler, I have 1 inch and 2 inch. Right there will be 1.5. So I'm going to actually pull this away, pull this down, and I'm going to slide my 1.5 mark, keeping this nice and straight at the top and straight at the bottom, and running my 1.5 inch mark all the way down like so. Then I will be able to cut a perfect 1.5 inches for my bias binding. And if it slides a little, what I'm going to do is come down here, hold it, pause. You can see I'm going to adjust ever so slightly, and then hold it. I'm keeping my fingers out of the way of the rotary cutter, but I can pause and move. And then I've got 1.5 inch strip. I'm just going to clip that very end. So you'll do this to your whole half yard and you'll have all these 1.5 inch strips. But let me show you how to do this if you do not have this awesome ruler. I'll fold that and put that away. I am going to use a longer ruler for this, the longest ruler I have. And many of our longest rulers are about 24 inches. But then I'll show you one more time how to do it if you just have our favorite 5x15. So if you have the nice long ruler, to make your first cut, and I'm going to flip this around so you can see from an original square edge, to make your first cut, you're going to find your 45-degree line on your ruler. So you can see that right here. And I'm again going to line this up on my mat and then line my 45 line with the edge of my fabric. See that? Even my long ruler is not going to reach the edge of this fabric. That's okay. What I'm going to do is pull this all the way down to the edge of my mat. I've still got my 45 lined up here, and I can see where I'm going to aim off the edge. So what I'm going to do is just like I did before, I'm going to start with my hand down here and cut with my rotary cutter about halfway up the ruler. Pause. This time I'm going to slide the whole ruler till it's past the edge, and then I can actually slide it until the 45 is straight on this edge of the fabric. You see that? So now I'm going to hold my hand very nice and carefully. I haven't moved this. It's okay if you wiggle, but now I'm going to continue, follow the ruler off the edge, and I still have an exact 45 bias inch cut. Okay, let's do that one more time, and we'll do that with the 5x15. So once I've got that first cut, and you'll do this the same way, it has the same markings. So you have the 45 that you'll put on the bottom, and then you have a 45 here that you'll be able to put on the side. So just follow it up, and you can see many of our mats have a 45-degree line that you can also follow along. What I'm going to do now with the 5x15 is cut my next strip. So I'm going to take advantage of that line on my mat, and I'm also going to take advantage of that 45 line, and I'm going to slide it here so that the 1.5 inch marks are riding along the edge of my fabric. So here's a question we get often, and there's no right or wrong answer. Just be consistent to how you do it. Do I cut with it on the outside of the fabric? Do I cut with it on the inside of the fabric? Does it have to be exactly on the edge? It's threads. It's not going to make a huge difference as long as you're consistent to yourself. So whichever one you go with that for all of them. I'm going to line it right up on the line because that's what my brain likes. So do what works for your brain. And down here you can see I'm going to scooch, and I'm just going to drag my fingernail to pull that fabric in place. And then I'm going to scooch it down to where the 45 mark is on the edge of the fabric. So I've got 45 degree, sorry, I keep saying inch, 45 degree mark, and then 1.5 inches. So once I've scooched it all where it needs to be, then I'm ready to start my cut. And again, I'm going to pause and slide, do the electric slide, slide to the left. Okay, and I'm going to watch that everything stays in place. So my 1.5 inch line is still on the edge there, and I'm off the edge with my ruler. Bingo. So again, just cut 1.5 inch bias strips so you get that nice stretch. And then I will show you how to turn this into piping. All right, so the next step is to join all of our bias pieces together. So when we cut them, they were already cut at that 45. So when we're used to making binding, we're used to doing the plus sign method where we have to cross and then stitch. In this case, that's already mostly done for us. So we're actually gonna flip it this way, and we're gonna let a 1/4 inch hang off either side. If we did it just like this, once we get the 1/4 inch in, we're actually going to be off by a 1/4 inch. As you see where that 1/4 inch would come off the edge here. So your bias binding is going to be quite a bit wonky. So that is why we're going to pull this down 1/4 inch. So you can kind of see from my little bit of finger press, that's where that seam is going to go, and it's going to go right to the edge and right to the edge. So when we sew 1/4 inch from here to here, when we open it, it'll be nice and straight. So we're going to do that for all our pieces. I'll just do this one right here, so you can see what that looks like on the machine. And I'm using this, which is from Cluck Cluck Sew. It is 1/4 inch seam tape that tells me from my needle how far 1/4 inch away will be. It's especially helpful for angles like half square triangles and like this kind of project. So I'm just going to line this up, and I'm eyeballing it. It doesn't have to be perfect, but so those are each roughly the same. And then I'm going to put my needle down right there at the seam, and I'm just going to use this red line to run this along. The other thing you can do is draw a line if you're really squeamish about it, but you can just eyeball it. It's not a big deal. So we're just going to sew straight across. All right. And I'm going to trim my threads. And before I trim the extra away, I want you to see when I open it up, we are going to have a pretty darn straight. Now it's still off by just a hair. I could undo that and redo that, but I know that my 1/4 inch seam will catch that, so I'm okay with it. However, if you want to, you can, again, draw a line so it's really perfect and just follow that line. But I also find that if one side is bigger, if I press to that side, so in this case, I would probably go ahead and press to this side, it is going to half take care of itself. So I'm going to show you that here. So let me show you what it looks like to press. Pick a direction, give it a little wiggle, and then the whole thing continues to have that stretch, and you've pressed the side. The next thing you're going to do once you've done the entire length of this, and I'm going to recommend maybe 3, 4 strips, maybe 5, so you have plenty to go around any size pillow project you're going to do, is we're going to start by wrapping it around our yay rope. So I'm going to untangle it a little, but I'm mostly going to do this as I go. And I'm going to leave a bit of a tail of this rope because it's going to make it easier to join later. Then I'm going to lay this out so that my seam is wrong side up. And I'm going to cut one end nice and straight because I'm going to need it straight later. So I lay it here. Any ruler will work. And just cut off that one little triangle of waste. Okay. So I'm going to take that tail that I was talking about, and I'm going to stick this out here about 3 inches. And then I'm going to start wrapping it around, and we will stitch it down. So we're basically going to wrap around and make these edges meet. So you can kind of see we're going to make those edges meet, and we're going to stitch using either a zipper foot or a very skinny foot out here somewhere. And we can stitch right up against the rope if you can get that close, but as long as it's about 1/4 inch from the edge, you will catch it. So the rope may have a tiny bit of play and wiggle room. That is perfect. So I'm going to take it to the machine and show you how I do that. If you find that this is moving on you, there's another tool that I can show you that can help. I'm going to show you just kind of eyeballing it and doing it by hand a little piece at a time, and that works best for me. But if it is rolling on you and it is getting away from you and you still want to do it, one of the other tips in our toolbox is to use something like this, which is a double-sided tape This one is 1/8 of an inch wide. And what you can do is run this along the edge of your fabric. And this is often a good place to start. You can use a little bit of any kind of tape or glue for sewing, but you can even use school glue. But I found this tape works really well. And so you stick it down and you pull off this paper and it leaves the adhesive. So now when I lay my rope in here with its tail and I wrap around, I'm going to make this edge join that edge, but I'll have that adhesive to help me stick it. And it's repositionable, so I don't have to get it right immediately. It's not going to be the end of the world. But you can see it's holding there. So I can just kind of line it up and use my fingers to squeeze. If I need to readjust, I can peel it back and readjust those pieces. So you can do this for as much or as little of the binding that you like. I'm going to start with it just there. I'm going to go ahead and do the whole length of this, and then once I get started, I'm going to go ahead and finish the whole length and come back and show you what that piping looks like at the end. So what I have to show you is what happens when I use the two different feet. So this is what we were just working on earlier, where I was using my skinny foot and using the edge of my foot against the rope. And so that placed the thread a little bit further away from the rope. This is what happens when I use a zipper foot. The zipper foot lets me get a little bit closer. Both of these will work, so whichever foot you feel more comfortable with, you should use. I've gone ahead and made a whole length to go around my whole pillow using the zipper foot, because I want to show you what happens when you do have that extra line. But like I said, this works just as well, so whichever one works better for you, go for it. So I'm going to set this aside. And now that I have my bias binding wrapped around, I've created my own piping. Now it's time to create the body of the pillow. So in our case, we're just going to do a pillow that will fit a 14-inch pillow frame. And so this one is about a 15-inch square. So that's what we're starting with. I'm going to square it up just a little bit. So it feels like it's a little wonky on one side. And it's easier to start with a square. And then cut it down. And I'm just going to spin it. And you can see I come in a little bit. So I think what I'll do is actually come in 1/2 inch here and 1/2 inch here to make this square. So it'll end up being 14.5 square to start with. And you kind of want your pillow to be about the same size as the insert, because otherwise you kind of get flopsy corners. And maybe that's the look you're going for. Cool. I'm usually looking for it to be completely filled if I can. So I'm just going to go here to a 14.5 inch square to start. Okay. Once I've got that, I am going to take my piping and I'm going to start somewhere in the middle, about 2/3 of the way over with now my stitches, and I'm going to clip this to this piece of fabric. Just lining up the edges and adding my clips. When I get to the corner, I have a decision to make. Because of the bias, I can trim a little clip in and make it super square, or I can let it go around the edge. I'm going to opt for the rounded edge corner. So it's gonna pinch and fold just a little bit. That's okay. I'll still be able to stitch around that edge. And I will clip that down. And I'm going to go all the way around my pillow. And I'll be back in just a minute. All right, so I'm going to come around this last corner and then I will show you how to join these two edges. So again, I'm just going to kind of use my fingers to guide it into place. And it's gonna wrinkle a little bit, and that's okay. That's part of the point of the bias binding around the piping, is that it can handle corners and it will smooth out. And it does not matter if your clips go this way or this way. It's just a matter of personal preference. So if you're going wild and they go willy-nilly, it doesn't matter. Now we're gonna go ahead and join these. So I am going to slide this down here. And what I want to do is join these two pieces of fabric just like I would join binding on a quilt. So what I want to do is come up here so that I've got nice overlap, plenty more than I need, and I'm going to go ahead and snip off the rest of this. Good pair of shears. It may take a couple slices to get through the rope, but it's just a nice cotton rope, so you can cut right through it. So what I'm going to do is come to about where they meet, and I'm going to seam rip all the way to there. All right, so the way that I do my plus sign is that I cut off a little piece of this, and that's how much I overlap. So I'm going to flip this around and show you how I do this. It's a little bit different than how Jenny, Natalie, or Misty do it. It's kind of a combination of all of them with a little extra twist. So I am going to create a plus sign, but I need to know how far these cross. So what I do is I pick a point somewhere in the middle and I put my pin there on the actual pillow. That's where I want these two pieces to cross. And it's straight enough for me, okay? So when I lay this down here, and I take that little piece that I cut off, I leave it folded. And what I'm going to do is put the fold just over the pin as if the pin were going through it. See that? And I'm going to snip it here. In this case, I'm not ready to snip, so I'm just going to make a mark. And that's because with our three-dimensional rope, I may need to loosen or tighten this. So I'm not ready to just cut it off the way I would binding. But I'm going to give myself just a little bit of a mark inside the seam allowance. I'm going to pull this away, do the same on this side. So keep the rope out of the way. I lay this nice and flat over my pin. I take my little extra snip and I lay it as if the pin were inside it. And the reason I do that is that we want it to be a little tighter versus a little looser, especially because we have a bias binding. It's going to have that nice stretch. So we want it to be just a little bit tighter than looser. So again, I'm just going to make a mark there. Those are the spots that I want this to cross over. So I'm going to pull this down here. And I'm going to pull this down here and pull the rope out of the way and try to make this as flat as I can. And then I'm going to take this mark and I'm going to line that up on the edge of the fabric and this edge where my other mark is. So I'm making a little box here. And when I sew corner to corner, it should turn out nice and even. So what I'm going to do, again, to help me out, because of all this extra three-dimensional stuff, is I'm going to bring my ruler back over and lay it down from that intersection to that intersection. I'm just going to kind of slide it in so nothing moves on me. Now I know where to make my mark. And again, this is on the inside, but I'm just going to make a little dotted line. You would use your favorite marking tool, even just a pencil. I want you to be able to see this, so I'm using a Sharpie. Be careful with that because you can sometimes see that on the other side of the fabric. Okay. And then the last bit of security is I'm going to take the pin out of the pillow top and I'm going to place it well away so I have room for my foot, but hold this together. That's what I've got. Okay, So I'm happy I made the mark because this wants to move around. I'm happy I pinned it because this wants to move around because of these extra rope pieces. So I'm going to very carefully take this over to the machine and I'm going to stitch right on my dotted line. And to do that, I'm going to let the rest of this fall away and I'm going to force it to behave because it's not the boss of me, I'm the boss of it. So I'm going to slide this in. You'll also notice I have my zipper foot on the machine, and that was to make it easier to sew right up close to the edge on my piping, but it's also going to make the rest of this project easier. So I am going to slide this under here and put my needle down right where that intersection begins. I don't want to sew over my rope, so I'm going to make sure it's pulled out of the way, and I'm going to use my thumb to hold that back. This isn't very flat, so I'm going to have to go nice and slow and use my finger to smooth it down. And I'm again going to use the line on my machine to help me stay nice and straight. And we will sew corner to corner right along our marked line. You may choose to pull out a stiletto if you have one at this point. I'm just going to go ahead and get close, but not let my fingers be too close, and stitch right off the edge. All right. Before we do a lot of clipping, let's see how we did. Okay. So much like regular binding, I want to be able to pull it open, and you can see there, you can see my dotted line, which is why I don't advocate using Sharpie yourself, but I wanted you to be able to see that. I stitched right along that, and it has continuously bound this piping, except we've got rope sticking out the end. So let's take care of that. First thing we do is go ahead and clip this a 1/4 inch away. And we can use scissors, and it's approximate because we've already stitched the seam, so this part does not have to be perfect. I'm going to go ahead and clip these extra little corners for less bulk because we're also going to be joining the rope here. All right. So now we know that's going to lay down in the right spot. Awesome. We need to tuck the rope back in. But we also need to join the rope. So I don't want the rope to join at the exact same spot the fabric joined because that makes it a little easy for it to come apart. So I'm going to pick a spot closer to this side and I'm just going to snip it. Make sure I have plenty of this side to go over. They're going to cross quite a bit. Okay? And I'm just going to cut this off. Mini bravery test, not a big deal. Now, we are going to go ahead and press this open with a little finger press and tuck this rope back in. And we don't want it to overlap exactly, but this is going to fray just a little bit. So kind of like we just did where there's like a plus sign, we can think about there being just a little bit of overlap. If these both fray a little bit, they will join and still be solid around the edge. So I'm going to overlap it about 1/4 inch and clip it. And this will naturally fray just a little bit when you give it a touch of a wiggle. Those will overlap. Then just like before, we fold over. We'll take this to the machine and we'll stitch this the rest of the way to the pillow top. And since we haven't actually stitched anything, we've just clipped, we can actually start there and be very secure. So I'm going to put my needle down right on the edge, and you can see that's exactly where I was stitching this binding. And you can add more clips if you like. I'm going to hold this part with my fingers because I like to feel it nesting. Just like any other seams, you're nesting that rope together. It's just tucked inside, and your foot is going to ride right along the outside of that. And I'm gonna go ahead and adjust and just do a little bit at a time. And I'm gonna slow down, and you can adjust your foot as you need to. I feel like I went off a little bit, so I'm gonna pull back and Just make sure the rope is tucked in nice and tight. And what I'm doing is lifting my foot and using my fingernail to press that little bit of bulk that wants to follow out. And it wants to because it hasn't been secured in the first place. But once you get this part, you're done with the hardest part. It's not that hard, it just takes a little patience. So again, I'm going to just use my fingernail, poke that fabric under, and as we come back to where we've stitched, it's going to get a lot easier. Just adjust. There we go. Nice and easy. Now we can sail around. I'm going to show you the first corner, and then I'll meet you back here when they're all done. So we're going to come around the corner. We're just going to follow the curve. And I'm going to take that out, and I'm going to kind of hold this in place. When you go around a corner, you want to slow down, and you're just going to kind of guide the fabric around. The feed dogs are pulling the bottom of the fabric. You don't have to worry about pushing, pulling, tugging. You just want to gently guide it so that it can do its own job. So I'm just using my fingertip and making sure I'm holding that to the, as I come off of here. And then see I'm lined up. As I come into the straightaway, then I can sail down the straightaway. So you'll do that all the way around your pillow, and I'll join you right here to show you how to add the back. So now what I've done is gone all the way around and I've attached it to the front of the pillow like I've done here. For this pillow, I am now going to show you how to do what's called an envelope back. So what this does is overlap two pieces so that it is covered, so that when it does this bulge that happens, it doesn't expose the pillow. So to do that, we're going to start with two pieces that are almost as large as the front. These are going to be 12 inches by 15 inches. And what I'm going to do is fold over one edge of each side and get you a nice clean seam. Now, this does not seem to have a right or wrong side, which is awesome, and a lot of our solids don't either. So I'm going to choose one. I'm going to fold over a 1/4 inch and another 1/4 inch, and that will be a nice clean edge. So I'm going to stitch that down on both of these back pieces. So once I have both of these sides, I'm going to overlap them. I want the right side towards the right side of the pillow. So I have cut this so that it is bigger all the way around. And that is to make my life easier, and I will show you how. So my right side is there, and again, my right side overlaps, and I want to be overlapping the edge by a good portion as well. Just nice and all the way around. Then what I'm going to do is put a pin right here to hold these two pieces together, like that. And I'm going to put clips on the ends where my seams are. And I'm not clipping this yet to the piping or the front of the pillow, just clipping it to one side of this flap to the other side of this flap. I'm going to turn the whole project over by grabbing for these corners and do a nice flip. Okay. Why I do that is I want to now sew from this side, because now that I've sewn the piping on, I have a stitch line to follow. So I can use my finger to make sure the piping stays on the inside and doesn't start rolling to the outside, but I can also just follow that stitch line all the way around, and I know that the pillow will match and it will catch everything in the seams. So I can't clip all the way around this time, but I will put pins in the corners and in these sides to hold everything in place. I'm going to put my needle down because it's a zipper foot to get me started. I'm putting my needle down right along that stitch line, and I'm between the two clips to get started. So I'm going to follow that stitch line, and again, I'm just going to go nice and slow. I'll show you how I go through this clip with that extra layer. And I leave these pins in place, but don't snag your fingers on them, that hurts a lot. Okay. Following my stitch line, and I can feel, you can kind of see that lump that is the rope of the piping. And I'm coming up on that clip. So I'm gonna keep an eye on it, make sure it doesn't flip. And you can see I'm close but not quite on the stitch line. That's fine. It's gonna be hidden by the time we get that far. But it's still a good rule of thumb to follow that as close as we can. See, I'm right past that. I can keep going. And I'm gonna go around the curve now. So I'll show you how to go around one corner, and then I'll come back when we are all set. And again, as we need to, we can pick up the presser foot, turn the piece just a little bit, take a few more stitches, pick up, pivot, take a few more stitches. Because we want to stay nice and close to that binding. That's how we're going to get the curve on that corner. So pick up and pivot. And you got to think about the corner as just a few stitches at a time. And now we can trim. I like to do this part with scissors. You can line everything up with a rotary cutter, but because of that piping, it's gonna roll on you. So I like to just hold this in my hands and follow about a 1/4 inch away, and I will even clip along the curve. And for most of this, I can follow the seam allowance of my top. And as I get to the curve, I'm going to follow the stitch line and just kind of cut around that corner. And I'm just going to trim, trim, trim. You do this how you're comfortable. Some people like to leave it on the mat and let the bottom edge of the scissor stay down there. They feel more confident that way. Otherwise, just kind of make sure you're always cutting away from yourself, not towards yourself. That's when we make mistakes and accidents happen. All right, go around this last corner. And you can see right here, I got real close. That's okay. It's caught in the seam. I'm not worried about it. I just won't trim it further. All right. Once we have trimmed everything and we're happy with that, now we're going to take all these pins out, finally. Put them back in my pin cushion. And we will flip this through the opening. One last pin. Reach through and pull this side, and then you can just use your thumbs to push out your corners. Okay, now we've caught everything, and we have piping along the edge of our pillow. So here we have piping made by you on your pillow. Now let me show you how to do a different closure. We'll go ahead and skip the binding of piping on this one, but I do want to let you know that this same method of attaching, first to the front and then to the back, works for poms as well. So got just a little bitty sample, got the envelope back here, the front, and the poms got attached the same way. They're just, again, bulky in a different way than the rope, but they come by the yard. And so you will attach them just the same way we did with the piping, kind of a 1/4 inch from the edge, making sure they're all facing to the inside. When you go to join poms, I'll show you this really quickly, you have a couple of options. As they come all the way around the pillow and you're ready to join them, you can cut off one pom and then be able to overlap and you can take off this little bit that frays. You can use a little bit of fray check or even a lighter if you're comfortable with that. And you will overlap the palm and it will look continuous when you sew it on. So this is even easier to join than your regular piping. But you now know how to do both. Now let's show you how to close this with a zipper instead of the envelope back. We're first going to start with 2 squares the same size because we don't need to overlap the back this time. And with this linen blend, there's no right side and wrong side, but you would want to go ahead and put right sides together all the time. So we're going to start with this. We're also going to need a zipper. In this case, our zipper is a little bit shorter than our pillow. So we're going to kind of center it up. And as you can see on here, I'm going to eyeball it. It's about 1 3/4 inches, 1.5 inches on either side. And what I'm going to do is sandwich this between the tops of this, then open the zipper so that I can stitch around the outside and pull it through. So everything seams will go on the inside. So the way I do that is I like to open this about halfway, and I have stitched closed. Make sure you can see that I have stitched closed both sides. And that is so that I don't take the zipper head off. It happens, and we can show you how to put it back on. There are a couple of videos that we can link in the description to show you how to add that back on, but I don't want to take it off. So I'm going to leave it right there. And what I'm going to do is end up sandwiching it right sides together here, and then right sides together here. So we'll start with the first side. Again, we're going to kind of sandwich it in here. This is another good spot where if you have troubles, I always clip the ends first because I can see right now I am way off. So clipping first helps me adjust till I'm happy with it. So the important sides are the 2 sides, and then I'm going to kind of come in about 1/3 of the way here and 1/3 of the way here. And again, as you can see, it doesn't matter which way my clips go. They work no matter which way they're facing. Okay, use that zipper foot again, and I am just going to stitch along the edge of this to secure it to the pillow. So at this time, I can actually start off the edge, and I am just going to follow along, and this, again, needle down because it's a zipper foot, but it's going to follow along the edge of the zipper. And when I get here, this is getting bulky. I can pause with my needle down, reach in here and pull this past it. And then I can keep going. And I'm going to sew right off the edge. Okay. Now we're going to take this off the machine and clip it to the other side. All right, so here it is, just as we had it before. This now becomes the right side that we're going to line this up with. What we're gonna see here is that having stitched this closed helps keep this from wobbling everywhere. So if I had just an open edge, it'd be very difficult to line this back up. But having stitched it closed, I just fold it over, line up the corners of these pieces here in the corner, and line up the zipper edges here, and then I can clip, and it will be in the same spot. So I'll show you again here. I'm gonna line up the corners, peel that back, fold the zipper over, and I'm clipping just to the zipper right there. Then I can actually fold this towards myself, and I can give myself a couple of extra clips. Again, about 1/3 of the way in here, and about 1/3 of the way in here. You do the same thing, start off the edge, stitch along. When the zipper head is in the way, I will zip it right out of the way. And even though I'm starting the needle off the edge, I want you to see that my foot is holding this in place. That's going to keep things from moving around too much. Needle down, and off we go. And I don't want to trap myself, so I'm going to go ahead and reach in here and pull the zipper head out of the way. And then finish off the stitch. You can see it's creeping away, so I'm just going to pull this back out to the edge and stitch right off. All right. Now we have one big rectangle of fabric with a zipper in the center. Good job. In order for this to work really well, we're going to want to open this up about halfway. And again, this is stitched closed, so it's going to hold, but that's also where we're going to start our next stitches. So we've got that open halfway, which means we can open this up again. We're going to line everything up. And you can see when I start lining everything up, my zipper means that these aren't matching up. So I want to pull this down so that they do line up. And for me, that's the important thing, is that the bottom is lined up. So I'm going to do the important parts first in the corners, and then a couple in the middle. And that means this is going to be kind of folded, and that's great. So what we're going to do is go ahead and fold the zipper over like this. We're going to start just inside where that zipper edge is, so I can mark that, saying I want to start on that side. And I'm going to start here and just stitch to the corner, pivot, and stitch around. And we'll go all the way around these 3 sides of the pillow. You've already added the zipper, so don't stitch that side. Okay, that is it. So let's check to make sure that our zipper functions and was caught. One of the nice parts is you don't even have to clip all these edges. If they fray when you wash, they'll fray on the inside, but you've got plenty of room. You can, if you want to, go ahead and finish those edges, but again, they're on the inside of your pillow, so it's not a big deal. So I'm going to open this all the way, and we're going to flip. Again, I'm going to take my thumbs, put them in the corner, push them through, and you can decide how pointy you want your corner to be. You can poke that out with any kind of point turner. Just use your thumb. You can use a chopstick, purple thing, whatever you want to do, but you can also leave that a softer curve. So again, thumbs, push that through. We've got a couple extra threads we'll trim. And then the bottom corners are even easier. Ta-da! You have made a pillow cover that has a zipper closure. It was that easy. And the zipper opens and closes. Zippers are wont to do. And you can use something decorative. You can press this. Again, linen holds a nice wrinkle or crease. And that is all you need to do to make your own pillows in any kind of fabrics. So we can't wait to see what projects you make and which fabrics you choose, which trims, how you make your own piping, what colorful zippers you choose, all the things to make this custom to your style. Use the hashtag MSQC Show and Tell your projects. Thank you for joining me today, and happy sewing.
Hi everybody, it's Jenny from the Missouri Star Quilt Company. We hope you enjoyed watching this video. If you aren't already part of the Missouri Star Quilt Company family, Be sure to subscribe so you won't miss a thing. And if you click that bell, it'll notify you every time a new tutorial comes out. See you next Friday.